I got the call on a Wednesday morning that Biscuit was gone. Not dead. Just gone. Given away to strangers while I was still hooked up to an IV in a hospital bed. And the person who did it? My sister-in-law. The one I had trusted to take care of him. Let me tell you about Biscuit first, because you need to understand what we're actually talking about here. I adopted Biscuit 11 years ago from a rescue in Clarksville, Tennessee. I was 26, newly single, stuck in a dead-end office job, and my therapist told me to do something, anything, that wasn't sitting on my couch feeling sorry for myself. So on a Saturday morning, I walked into that shelter with no real plan. And there he was. A golden brown basset hound mix with ears so long he literally stepped on them going downstairs. White patch on his chest shaped like a mitten. The shelter staff called him a return. His previous owners had given him back because he was, quote, too needy. I put down $85 in adoption fees and never looked back. For 11 years, Biscuit was my constant. Roommates came and went. I changed jobs 3 times. I moved twice, and eventually bought a small house on Delmore Street, specifically because it had a fenced backyard. And he deserved grass under his feet. I got married at 31 to a man named Daniel, and I told him before he ever proposed, Biscuit is non-negotiable. Daniel laughed and said he already knew that. Biscuit came to our wedding rehearsal dinner in a bow tie. We have the pictures to prove it. By the time all this happened, Biscuit was 13 years old. He had a luxating patella in his left back leg and mild arthritis in his hips. His whole routine was dialed in. Half a cup of grain-free senior kibble mixed with a spoonful of wet food every morning, grain-free specifically because his stomach couldn't handle the regular kind, per our vet. Fish oil capsule tucked in the middle of the food, joint supplement twice a day. One short, slow walk around the block every evening, same route every time, down Delmore, left on Prentice, left on Oak Hill, back home. No longer, because his joints couldn't take it. He slept in a foam orthopedic dog bed right next to my side of the bed, not in the bed. He didn't like being up high anymore. He snored loud enough that house guests thought we had a white noise machine. And every single night for 11 years, I reached down from the bed and scratched behind his ears before I fell asleep. Every single night. That's Biscuit. Now let me tell you about Renata. Renata is Daniel's younger sister. She's 34. She has never owned a pet in her life, and has made it pretty clear she doesn't think much of the concept. I heard her say at Thanksgiving 3 years ago, totally casually, that animals belong outside. Just floated it out there like a normal opinion. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table because he knew I was 2 seconds from responding. I let it go. I should have clocked it harder. The first time she made a comment directly about Biscuit was about 18 months before all of this. She came over for Daniel's birthday dinner in March. Biscuit was doing his usual thing, lying on his bed in the living room, snoring. Renata wrinkled her nose and said, "Don't you think it's a little sad, keeping an old dog like that going?" I said he was fine, happy. She shrugged and said he smelled a bit. And old dogs get like that. Daniel changed the subject. I filed it away. 8 months after that, at a family dinner in November, I mentioned Biscuit had a routine vet appointment coming up. Just senior blood work. Renata said she'd heard basset hounds were prone to expensive health problems and asked if Daniel and I had thought about what the plan was when he got really sick. I said the plan was to take care of him. She gave me a look like I was being dramatic. Daniel's mom, Patricia, she's 62, means well most of the time, sided with Renata just enough to sting. Said Renata was only asking a practical question. I didn't make a scene. I noted it and moved on. Then January hit. I ended up in the emergency room on a Sunday night. Ruptured appendix. I know. Everyone says they had a stomachache and pushed through. I pushed through for almost 2 full days before Daniel basically dragged me out the door at 11:30 at night. By the time they got me into surgery, my appendix had already ruptured. I was in that hospital for 8 days, IVs, antibiotics, drain tubes. The sickest I have ever been. Daniel stayed as much as he could. He took emergency leave for the first 3 days, then had to go back, because his job was in a critical deadline period. He was doing morning and evening hospital visits, and going home in between to sleep and take care of Biscuit. On day 4, he mentioned that Renata had offered to come stay at the house for a few days to help with Biscuit, feeding him, walking him, making sure he got his supplements. Daniel said she'd been pretty insistent. I said fine, as long as she follows the routine. I had a laminated sheet on the fridge with every single detail on it. The grain-free food, the fish oil, the joint supplement, the walk route, all of it. I told Daniel to show it to her directly. He did. He told me later she glanced at it and said, "I think I can figure out a dog." That should have been my warning. I should have called Renata myself that afternoon and made things very clear. Instead, I trusted Daniel would handle it and went back to focusing on not feeling like I was dying. I own that mistake. The rest of what followed is hers. On day 6, Daniel came to visit and seemed off. I asked what was wrong. He said Renata had mentioned that Biscuit seemed stressed, and she thought he might be better off somewhere more stable while I recovered. I said, "What do you mean? He is home. Home is stable." Daniel said he thought she just meant well. I told him to tell her to stick to the laminated sheet and leave his routine alone. I should have picked up the phone and called her myself. I didn't. And 4 days later, I paid for it. Day 8. Discharge day. Daniel picked me up at 2 in the afternoon on a Thursday. I was still sore, still on antibiotics, and all I wanted in the world was to get home and lie on my couch with Biscuit's head in my lap. We pulled into the driveway. Daniel let me in. I called Biscuit's name. Nothing. I walked to the living room. His orthopedic bed was there. His food bowl was in the kitchen. His leash was on the hook by the door, but no dog. I turned to Daniel and said, "Where is he?" His face did something I didn't like. He said Renata had placed Biscuit with a family she knew. Just temporarily. Just for a few weeks. She thought I needed to rest, and that Biscuit would be better off somewhere he could be properly cared for. I was standing in my own kitchen 8 days out of surgery, still wearing the hospital-issue socks I'd walked out in, and I started shaking, not from being sick. From pure fury. I gripped the edge of the counter and stared at his empty food bowl sitting by the cabinet and his leash hanging on the hook. I called Renata. She picked up on the second ring, calm as anything. "Oh, you're home. How are you feeling?" I said, "Where is Biscuit?" She explained it like it was the most reasonable thing she'd ever done. She'd talked to a coworker named Donna. Big house, yard, 2 kids who loved dogs. She thought Biscuit deserved a real family environment while I recovered. It was just temporary. But then she added, and I remember this exact phrasing, "Honestly, Miranda, this might be a good time to think about whether keeping him is the best thing for him." I said, "Give me Donna's address." Renata said she didn't want to do that until I had calmed down. I hung up. I went to Daniel and told him I needed the address. He called Renata. I could hear her from across the room, telling him to give me a few days, that she was doing this for my own good, that a 13-year-old arthritic dog was a lot for someone recovering from major surgery. I watched Daniel's face. He looked uncertain. That uncertainty hurt almost as much as what Renata had done. I said, "Daniel, she gave away my dog without my permission. I need you to get me the address." He got me the address. I was ready to get back in the car that second. Daniel convinced me to wait until morning. Not for Renata's sake, but because I was genuinely still recovering. It was already 4 in the afternoon, and Donna's house was 40 minutes away. I agreed to 9 a.m. the next morning. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed next to that empty orthopedic foam bed and stared at the ceiling. Around 2 in the morning, I reached down out of habit, 11 years of habit, and my hand landed on the edge of the empty bed instead of his ear. That was the moment I actually cried. Not in the hospital, not in the kitchen. There, alone in the dark, with my hand resting on a piece of foam. At 8:45 Friday morning, I called Donna directly. I found her last name from the address, tracked her down on social media, found her number listed publicly. She picked up. I told her I was the owner of the Basset Hound mix Renata had brought her, and that I was coming to pick him up today. Donna sounded genuinely surprised. She said she'd been told the dog's owner was in the hospital and not expected to take him back. I said I'm very much alive and taking him back today. Donna said, "Oh, of course, come whenever." Before I left, I called Renata. She picked up and I said one thing. "I'm picking up Biscuit this morning. If he is not there, I'm calling the police to report him stolen." She went quiet for a second. Then she said, "Miranda, you're being hysterical." I said, 9 a.m., you better be there. We drove to Donna's house. Nice place, big yard, 2 kids around 8 and 10 years old, clearly sweet. Biscuit was on a dog bed in their living room. When I walked in the door, he lifted his head. His tail started going. He got up slowly, careful on his hips, and walked across the room to me. He put his head against my leg and just stood there. I sat down on Donna's floor and held him for 5 minutes straight. I was crying and I couldn't help it. Donna was gracious about the whole thing. Her kids had clearly fallen a little bit in love with him, which I could see, and she apologized for the confusion. She handed me his food bowl back. She told me she'd actually gone out and bought grain-free food herself because she noticed he wasn't eating the other kind well. I liked Donna a lot. I got Biscuit in the car and drove home. Renata called while I was driving. I didn't answer. Now here's where things escalated. Because of course Renata didn't let it go. By Saturday evening, I had 3 texts from Patricia saying I'd embarrassed Renata by going around her and that I owed her an apology for threatening to call the police. I had a long voice message from Daniel's brother Greg. He's 38, has never once disagreed with anything Renata has ever said in the 10 years I've known him, telling me Renata was only trying to help and I was being ungrateful. I read every message. I didn't respond to any of them. Then on Sunday morning, Renata sent me a text that changed the temperature of the whole situation. She wrote, "I want you to know that I did what was best for Biscuit. Daniel agrees that a dog that old requires more than you can give right now. We had a conversation about this. Maybe it's time to think longer term." Daniel agrees. I put the phone down and looked at Daniel across the kitchen table. I asked him directly if he and Renata had talked about placing Biscuit permanently. He looked at his coffee. He said Renata had brought it up. He hadn't agreed to anything. I said, "Did you tell her no?" Long pause. "I told her I'd think about it." That was a bad moment. Not the worst moment of our marriage, but a real contender. I told Daniel very clearly, "Biscuit is my dog. I adopted him 11 years ago. My name is on every single vet record, every license, every registration. Any conversation about placing him permanently is not a family conversation. It does not happen without me, and it does not happen at all unless Biscuit is suffering, which he is not." Daniel said he understood. He said Renata had overstepped. He was saying the right things, but I'd lost some trust, and I needed to do something concrete about it. Monday morning, I called my vet, Dr. Pham. I explained what had happened, that Biscuit had been removed from my home and placed elsewhere without my consent while I was hospitalized. I asked her for a letter confirming that I was his owner of record, that he was in good health with a stable managed condition, and that his care was appropriate for his age and needs. Dr. Pham was great. She had the letter to me by Tuesday afternoon. She also told me that if anyone had tried to transfer his records or represent themselves as his owner during his absence, she would have refused. My name was on everything, and I had not authorized any changes. I also called an attorney, specifically one who handled pet custody issues, which is apparently its own specialty now. Her name was Claire. I had a 30-minute phone consultation. She told me that in my state, pets are legally considered personal property. Biscuit was registered in my name, licensed in my name, all vaccine records in my name. Renata had zero legal claim. Claire said if Renata had refused to let Donna return him or had taken any steps to block me from getting him back, that could have constituted theft. I had a clean case if it ever came to that. She told me to document everything. I documented everything. I made a folder on my computer, screenshots of every text, notes on every phone call, Dr. Pham's letter, Claire's consultation notes. I printed copies and put them in a physical folder too. Then I did something I had never done in any family conflict before. I sent a group text to Patricia, Greg, Daniel, and Renata. I don't love drama. I don't do group texts, but I needed everyone in the same conversation, so there could be no he said, she said later. The message said, "I want to make sure everyone is on the same page. Biscuit is home and he is fine. I have spoken to an attorney. I have documentation that I am his sole legal owner, and that his removal from my home was done without my knowledge or consent while I was hospitalized. I am not filing any complaint at this time, but I need everyone to understand that any future attempt to rehome, place, or remove him without my explicit written consent, will result in me pursuing legal action. I also need this to be the last conversation about whether keeping him is appropriate. He is my dog. This is not a group decision. I sent it and put my phone face down. The responses rolled in over the next 2 hours. Patricia said I was being extreme and that family didn't sue each other. Greg said I needed to dial it back. Renata sent a long paragraph about how she had sacrificed her time and emotional energy trying to help me, and this was how I repaid her. Daniel sent me a separate text that just said, "Good, I'm sorry I didn't say this sooner." That helped. Not all the way, but it helped. I didn't respond to anyone, except Daniel. About a week later, Renata called Daniel, not me, Daniel, and said she felt I'd threatened the family with legal action, and that I owed her an apology for implying she'd done something wrong. Daniel told me about the call immediately after it happened. He told her, "You placed her dog without her permission. You told a stranger the owner was not expected to take him back. Those are not small things, Renata. You need to apologize to Miranda." Renata said she had nothing to apologize for. Daniel said, "Then we don't have much to talk about right now," and he ended the call. Patricia called twice, trying to broker some kind of peace. I picked up the first call. She said Renata was hurt. I said I was hurt. She said family had to forgive each other. I said I was open to a conversation when Renata was ready to acknowledge that what she did was wrong. Patricia did not love that answer. The second call I let go to voicemail. Greg sent one more long message about how I was destroying the family over a dog. I replied with 2 sentences. "Biscuit is not just a dog. Please don't contact me about this again." He didn't. My best friend Claudia, she's known me since college, she's watched me love this dog for 11 years, came over about 2 weeks after I got home. She brought soup and a bag of Biscuit's favorite soft training treats, the kind he can still chew at his age. She sat on my couch with his head in her lap. She said, "You did everything right. Don't let them make you feel crazy." Claudia is the kind of friend who tells you when you're wrong, so when she says you're right, you believe it. About 3 weeks after the group text, I got an email from Renata. Not a call, an email, which meant she drafted it more than once. 3 paragraphs. The first was about everything she'd sacrificed helping during my hospital stay. The second was about how she genuinely believed she was acting in everyone's best interest. The third said, "I understand now that I should have asked you first. I'm sorry that you feel the situation was handled poorly. I'm sorry that you feel." I read it twice. I showed it to Daniel. He sighed. I said, "This isn't an apology." He agreed. I replied with one line, "Thank you for reaching out. When you're ready to have a real conversation, I'm open to it." She didn't respond. I don't know if Renata and I will ever get back to whatever we were before, which was never warm but was at least functional. I don't need her to be my friend. I need her to understand that she does not have authority over my home, my dog, or my medical situation. Whether she ever actually gets that, I can't control. What I can tell you is where things stand now, about 3 months out from all of this. Biscuit is home. He is fine. Better than fine. Dr. Pham did a full senior wellness check when I brought him back. Other than his usual arthritis management, he is in good shape for 13. His weight is stable. His blood work from last month was solid. She noted he'd lost about half a pound during his week at Donna's, probably from the stress and the food change, but he is back to his normal weight now. His routine is exactly what it was. Half a cup of grain-free kibble, spoonful of wet food, fish oil capsule in the middle, joint supplement twice a day, short slow walk in the evening, down Delmore, left on Prentice, left on Oak Hill, back home. He stops at the same fire hydrant every time. He stops at the corner by the oak tree, because there is a calico cat that lives in that house, and he likes to look at it for 30 seconds before moving on. We let him look. Daniel and I are okay. We had some long conversations about what happened, not fights, actual conversations. He admitted he was passive when he should have pushed back on Renata. He admitted that telling her he'd think about it when she raised permanent placement was wrong, and he should have shut it down immediately. I told him I needed to know he would protect our household from his family the same way I would protect it from mine. He said he understood. So far, he's backed that up. Patricia hasn't brought up Renata since my last call with her. We had a normal phone call a couple weeks ago and none of this came up. I don't know if that's progress or just avoidance, but I'll take the quiet. And every night, without fail, I reach down from the bed and scratch behind Biscuit's ears. He lifts his chin a little when I do it. His tail moves once. Just once, slow and steady. Then he puts his head back down and starts snoring. Last week I was sitting on the kitchen floor, stretching out some post-surgery stiffness, and Biscuit came over and just leaned against my side. He does that sometimes. He just leans. He is warm and heavy, and yes, he smells a little like a dog. I would not change one single thing about him. So, was I wrong here? I threatened legal action. I went around my sister-in-law to get my dog back. I sent a group text that made the whole family uncomfortable. I haven't apologized to Renata, and I'm not going to. I genuinely don't think I was in the wrong. But tell me, what would you have done in my position? Would you have handled any part of this differently? Drop it in the comments.